kick us off.
Thank you very much. You know,
Sure.
Caroline, in your first briefing, the media went after this administration for deporting illegal immigrants they claimed were not criminals.
That's
My
right.
question is, do you think they're out of touch with Americans demanding action on our border crisis?
The media out of touch? I think the media it certainly is out of touch, and I think that's proven by a number of things, John. Number one, there was a New York Times poll that was released prior to President Trump's inauguration by the New York Times, which of course is a legacy media outlet, that showed that 83% of Americans support deporting the individuals that you mentioned, illegal immigrant criminals, especially those who have committed heinous crimes in the interior of our country. And I received a very actually interesting statistic on this front from ICE this week. 97% of the deportations that this administration has made thus far are of individuals who had a removal order from the previous administration, but were never removed from the interior of our country. So this shows that the previous administration was actually defying our laws, and all this administration is doing is simply following the laws, the immigration laws of this great country. Thanks for the question, John. Anything else?
No, that's it.
Okay, great. Peter.
Thanks, Caroline. If President Trump is telling us that air traffic control towers are staffed with unqualified controllers, these DEI hires who never should have been brought on, then it's not safe to fly commercially, is it?
The president was asked and answered this yesterday, and he believes that it is still indeed safe, and Americans should feel safe traveling our skies. With that said, two things can be true at the same time, and we certainly have seen the deterioration of federal hiring standards at the Federal Aviation Administration, and the president wants to increase those standards. He wants pilots in this country who have the great responsibility of flying American citizens by the tens of millions every single day to be chosen for that position based on their merit and their skills. And so the administration will continue to prioritize this.
Was the air traffic controller in the DCA tower on Wednesday night hired or not fired at some point because of his or her race?
That investigation is ongoing. And so when we have updates on the exact individuals who were involved in the collision, including the air traffic controller, also the pilots of the helicopter and others, we will confirm those. I don't want to confirm names from this podium today. We're not in a position to do that. But I will say the president has still rightfully pointed out that there has been problems with the aviation industry over the past several years. And this started under Barack Obama in 2014.
And when the president says on Truth Social, the Black Hawk helicopter was flying too high by a lot, it was far above the 200-foot limit, that's not really too complicated to understand, is it? Is he suggesting a helicopter malfunction or a crew error or a crew doing this intentionally?
No, the president is simply stating what he said in that True Social post, which is that the helicopter was flying higher than it should have been, which is one of the reasons that led to this collision. And the other reasons for that are still being investigated, and I will let that investigation play out. Austin.
Hey, friends at Reuters are reporting that the president has made a decision on the Canada and Mexico tariffs, but that they won't actually be implemented until March 1st. I was wondering if you could confirm that and talk through some of the president's thinking.
I saw that report, and it is false. I was just with the president in the Oval Office, and I can confirm that tomorrow, the February 1st deadline that President Trump put into place at a statement several weeks ago continues. The president will be implementing tomorrow a 25% tariffs on Mexico, 25% tariffs on Canada, and a 10% tariff on China for the illegal fentanyl that they have sourced and allowed to distribute into our country, which has killed tens of millions of Americans. These are promises made and promises kept by the president.
The president yesterday said that last night he was planning to discuss whether an exemption would be made on oil imports. Do you have any information on what decision he made there, or will there be exemptions at all offered under this?
I don't have an update or readout for you on the exemptions, but those tariffs will be for public consumption in about 24 hours tomorrow, so you can read them then. Sure.
Thanks, Caroline. Can you guarantee that those tariffs won't increase prices for Americans, including at the gas pump and the grocery store?
I think Americans who are concerned about increased prices should look at what President Trump did in his first term. He effectively implemented tariffs, and the average inflation rate during the first Trump administration was 1.9%. In fact, when President Trump left office, it was 1.4%. So President Trump is going to do everything he possibly can to cut the inflation crisis that the previous administration imposed on the American people, and he will continue to effectively utilize tariffs.
If those tariffs do increase prices for Americans, will the administration reverse them?
That's a hypothetical question, and the president is intent on ensuring that he effectively implements tariffs while cutting inflation and costs for the American people. And, you know, the media has this way of just looking at everything in a microscope rather than looking at the whole of government economic approach that this president is taking. He will effectively implement tariffs. He's also, as I just answered from Stephen's question, committed to tax cuts. He's also clearly committed, as evidenced by his executive orders, to unleashing the might of our energy industry, which we know will eventually drive down inflation, and all the other economic measures that this president has made will have a Trump incoming economic boom, just like we saw in our first term.
And has the White House
Sure.
found any...
Fox Business, yes, go ahead.
Thanks, Caroline.
You're welcome.
Justin Trudeau, the Canadian Prime Minister, said today that if the U.S. imposes tariffs, he will respond and he will not relent until the tariffs are removed. Are we seeing the start of a trade war with Canada?
I don't think so. I think the president is going to implement those tariffs tomorrow, and he will respond to Mr. Trudeau's comments in due time, I am sure.
What
Sure.
type of things have to happen? What does the administration need to see in order to avoid those tariffs?
Well, the tariffs are incoming tomorrow on Canada, and the reason for that is because both Canada and Mexico have allowed an unprecedented invasion of illegal fentanyl that is killing American citizens and also illegal immigrants into our country. In fact, I have more language for you right here. Canada, Mexico, and China, which, as I mentioned, President Trump will implement a 10% tariff on China, have all enabled illegal drugs to pour into America. The amount of fentanyl that has been seized at the southern border in the last 2 years alone has the potential to kill tens of millions of Americans. And so the president is intent on doing this, and I think Justin Trudeau would be wise to talk to President Trump directly before pushing outlandish comments like that to the media.
If I may, one more.
Yes, Lindsay.
Go back to the plane crash for one. Can you go back to the plane crash for just 1 second?
You're interrupting your colleague, but
Oh,
sure.
I'm sorry, I thought you called on me. Just
I called on
question.
Lindsay.
The president this morning said the Black Hawk helicopter was flying too high. I'm wondering if he's basing that on what he learned from investigators, and if you could offer a little bit more of a window into how he is keeping abreast of this investigation.
Sure.
Is the NTSB briefing him separately? Is he meeting in the Situation Room? You just sort of offer a window into that.
Yeah, the president based that statement on truth because it is truth and it's fact, and it was relayed to him by the authorities who are overseeing the investigation into this horrific plane collision. And the president, as I said in my opening remarks, continues to be briefed on the collision by everybody across his cabinet, the Secretary of Transportation, the Secretary of Defense, the NTSB, who the commissioner there was in the Oval Office with him yesterday. Lindsay.
I also noticed that he is not ordered
Lindsay,
flights
go
to
ahead.
be flown at half staff.
Lindsay, go ahead. Thank
In
you.
recent days, the CIA actually revealed that they do also believe that COVID-19 was from a lab leak in Wuhan, China. How is the president planning on responding to this additional intel from the CIA, and will it impact how he responds to them with tariffs?
Yeah, kudos to John Ratcliffe for revealing that truth and that fact to the American people. Many years too late, the Biden administration had a chance to let the American people know the truth about that, and for some reason, they chose not to. I also would just like to point out that several years ago, when I was working in this press shop and President Trump would take to this podium to brief the American people on COVID-19, he suggested that COVID very well may have came from a lab in Wuhan, China. And many members in this very room mocked him for that, said he was spewing conspiracy theories. He was not. We now know that to be the confirmable truth. It took many years for it to come out, but the president was right in this instance again. Sure.
Specifically, obviously, why does the president feel like that's the best location or a good location to make sure that Americans are safe from violent, illegal migrant crime?
Well, it's a really good question, and the memorandum that he signed, the order that he signed, builds on his previous executive actions, obviously, to secure our southern border and deport illegal criminals from the interior of our country. We know that we have an issue with detention space here in the interior, which is a big reason why Congress needs to pass this reconciliation package as quickly as possible to ensure that DHS and ICE have the funding they need to detain these individuals that the administration is very swiftly rounding up and deporting, arresting and deporting these illegal immigrant criminals. And so the president feels it's an appropriate place. Taxpayers are already funding it. The space is there. Why not use it? And the Secretary of Defense, as I said, is working on that as we speak. Sure.
Karoline,
Yes.
Thank you so much for having me here and answering a question. So I want to talk more about the success that ICE is having finding these violent criminal aliens, some of them being sexual predators. But my friend Ben Bergquam reports that the Chicago mayor and the Illinois governor are preventing ICE agents from going into jails and prisons to enforce detainers against illegal aliens. In Maryland, the Attorney General has also put out a memo hindering local police cooperation with ICE. Does the administration have any comment on leftist state and local officials defying ICE and Trump's deportation efforts?
Yeah, I think it's very interesting that Democrat officials in these cities who have been completely overrun and overwhelmed by illegal immigrant criminals would refuse support and help to cure this problem that has especially taken over their cities. I guess they don't want to admit they've been wrong with their sanctuary city policies. I'm not sure. You'll have to ask them about their intentions. But they would be very wise to comply with this administration because this administration is hell-bent on enforcing our nation's immigration laws. And this administration will continue to arrest and detain and deport illegal migrant criminals. And what we won't do is defy our nation's immigration laws like the previous administration who had these orders of removal on illegal immigrants across the country and were refusing to execute on them. We will continue to remove illegal criminals from our nation's interior.
Are these sanctuary city leaders, are they violating the law?
I would certainly think so. I'd have to check back on which specific law they're violating, but certainly if they're not enforcing our nation's immigration law, sounds like they are breaking the law. And I would also add that their constituents don't approve of that. You've seen residents in Chicago show up at their city council meetings infuriated with their leadership in that city because they are working very hard to provide for their families. They want public safety and law and order, and their officials have abandoned those very basic American principles in these cities. And the American people want law and order. It's, again, an overwhelmingly popular policy to deport illegal criminals from our nation's interior, and this administration will continue to affect that goal.
More than 150,000 disabled Americans who are working today. The president talked a lot yesterday about hiring the best and the brightest to work in the federal government. Safety aside, does he believe that disabled people do have a place to work in the federal government? And does he also support the current protections for disabled people working in the private sector as well?
The president has made it very clear that this is a common sense solution to solving some of the problems that we have seen at the Federal Aviation Administration and also when it comes to many of the federal agencies across our government. People should not be hired based on their disabilities, based on their skin color, their gender, their race. None of that matters. What matters to this president and this administration is how well you can do your job, and the American people agree with that sentiment. So it's about competence, skill, and merit. And so the president is focused on ensuring that the most competent individuals, the best and the brightest in this country, are in positions in this federal government, especially when it comes to public safety. Can't overemphasize the importance of those jobs. Sure.
Karoline. So as follow-up on her question before, President Trump is holding China accountable on fentanyl by ramping up tariffs. So how is President Trump planning to hold China accountable on COVID origins?
I haven't spoken to the president about the COVID origins specifically in regards to any actions he may or may not take when it comes to China. But as I have previewed quite a few times today, he will be implementing a 10% tariff on China tomorrow.